I don't care what you look like or what you think. I don't care what you do or where you're from. All I care about is that gift hidden inside you. And all I want to do is help it come alive. Because where we're going, we're going to need a lot of heroes. Welcome back to 10,000 Heroes. I'm your host, Ankur Shah Delight. As you know, there are three things I'm trying to do with this show: inspiration, and turning the whole podcast medium inside out. So it's actually about love and connection. So my experiment in this episode, and I'm going to do more of this, is to have a crew of regulars come back and back. So John Giuliano, who was interviewed a few weeks ago, Jeff Salzman, who I interviewed a few months ago. I'm just going to have some of these just really awesome people, kind of like the way we've been having Nate come back time after time. So this is just a little feedback episode with John Giuliano about the solocast I did a couple weeks ago. So we're going to get into Gandhi a little bit here. And John, it was perfect timing because he'd just come out of a 3-day silent retreat, fasting, where he read Gandhi's autobiography. So without further ado, I give you, once again, John Giuliano. For the record, 10,000 Heroes is brought to you by Momentum Lab. The point of Momentum Lab is to turn idealists into impactors by aligning your dreams and aspirations with success in every area of your life today. Momentum Lab is like a playground for your highest self. We take your dreams seriously and help you remove any blocks to realizing them. We do this through courses, virtual events, in-person events, and our signature year-long accelerator. To join our world, engage in dialogue, meet up in person, and just blow your mind, sign up at momentumlab.com. So I'm back here with John Giuliano, who we recently interviewed. And I had the good fortune of calling John randomly this morning to ask him about this latest piece I just released about Gandhi and Gandhi's letter to Hitler. And he had just come out of a 3-day silent fasting retreat. So here we go. Your mind and body have been purified. I want to hear what's alive with you, John, and what you thought about this this little bit with Gandhi.
You know, I this whole thing about creating enemies, right? I mean, it's so in vogue. We always have to have the enemy, right? And of course, that letter, I mean, addressing Hitler as a human, radical, like other level, you know. And I remember, I remembered a story in the war in my own experience where they had blown up a school in a nearby village, and I went to the Catholic bishop, and the first thing he said to me was the enemy there? Was the enemy there? And I'm like, I'm not a smart ass nor a smart guy, but I did say to him, who's our enemy? Right? Who's our enemy? And yeah, and I think that is the radical position of love, right? And that kept going in my head, like here in El Salvador right now, just to relate it to kind of my context.
Exactly. That's what I want.
So El Salvador is still under this regime of exception, régimen d'exception, suspension of many civil liberties, 50, 60,000 people in the prisons. And the president insists that we're only going to provide human rights for the just.
Oh, yeah. Human rights for the just. Yeah.
Human rights for the just. The unjust, no rules. Do whatever you want. they don't deserve it. And it's like, again, and what I understand about Gandhi, and it's been interesting, 2-3 months for me. I've been reading some of the spiritual masters from India. I kind of took a dive, and it was really funny how I got into a real George Harrison riff, right?
Oh,
And George Harrison, the Beatle, of course, he was only a Beatle 6 years, but his life was a spiritual journey. 6 years he's known for the Beatles, but his life is a spiritual journey. And I think what I like, and then this last retreat that I just came out of the silence last night, but also the responsibility. We talk about Hitler, the extreme, but then where were we in that? Like where's our work? And it's really funny. It's like the story of the rich young man from the New Testament, and the great responsibility. And I reading the spiritual masters of India, the little bit I've read, there's a lot of responsibility. There's a lot of personal responsibility, right? And
what's that New Testament story? I don't think I'm familiar with that one.
Rich young man, and it could be any country. It could be someone going to the guru in India. Same thing. Master, how can I inherit the kingdom of heaven? Life. And the master says, well, sell everything you have, come follow me. And then the story ends, the rich young man goes away sad. Or the Zen story of the novice comes in and meets the guru, and he says, okay, I want you to start pulling the nails out of a wall. And of course, we all begin journeys like running, right? Especially spiritual journeys.
Mm-hmm.
He's ripping out, doing what the master told him to do. And he runs back and he's waiting for the moment, right?
I did it. I pulled out all the nails in record time.
Record time. Because he's trying to, that self-realization, right? He's going to a new place. And the master says, all right, now put them back. Now put them back. And this goes on, and eventually he's just as exhausted and leaves. And I think, and I think what I understand about Gandhi is that responsibility, of what could even lead to a radical letter like that. I think that's where I focused on, like what, is one, detachment. And I love it. He calls his autobiography experiments, right? It's an experiment of truth, which is wonderful because experiments fail, but you learn from experiments. To tie into, I think, your second part of the conversation, the science part, right? Experiments fail, and that's how we go into an experiment. We go into an experiment of love, and even a letter like that is an experiment, to what would appear as a monster, which is an easy thing to say. And yet, I thought about what comes before that letter, right? Detachment, discipline, experiments with food, and justice issues, and the lovely stories of his work, the resistance, right? And I won't venture to try to say it in as he says it in the Indian and the dialect, in the language, but the resistance, right? All of that is experiences, these experiments of love. And I think that in my tradition, which would be Jesus, right? Same thing, there's some passage that says, Anki says, because anyone could be good to the people you love. And then the Jesus message is, well, do good to those that do evil to you. That's the radical position. And I think that, I mean, that's truly revolutionary, because that is not doing the same thing, right? That's not doing the same thing. And I think that's the idea. That's what I understand of Gandhi, the resistance piece. And I think that most of us could understand some of that, but that personal responsibility, that personal transformation, that, that's not just resist and go. And what I love about Gandhi, and you mentioned this about the Tom Ruta work, and I was forever grateful, and I've used it. But the idea of the Gandhi concept of workers going somewhere and digging in and rolling their sleeves up, right? Staying there. And
yeah, let me just give a little background on that, because
please.
In the interview that people have heard, we didn't even get there to talk about the work you're doing with the Tamarindo. Like I think it was 2 hours. It's beautiful background of stories that you don't normally tell about growing up in New York, and, your journey with the bike and the Jesuits and Romero, but we didn't even get there. So what John's referring to is this project he's been doing for 30 years.
So this is our 31st year.
Yeah.
As the Tamarindo project. It's our 31st year.
Yeah. And I went there and I visited John in my senior year of college. And it really was my first, it just blew my mind open, my heart open in many ways. And then years later, I spent 5 years in India doing Gandhian constructive work. And I learned kind of the Gandhian approach to social work. And I was like, shit, this is what John was doing. This is exactly where you just go to a village and you're like, all right, how do I just be involved? How do I just submit and melt into this village and immerse, not as an other here to give something for a little while and then go, but just as a member of this community. How do I use all of my skills and capacity for the upliftment of this entire community that I'm immersed in, that I'm part of? And that's what I learned from you. And that's what you've never stopped doing. And it's amazing.
So
amazing.
I know we're on the air, but I'll say this, something I would really like to do. And over the last few months, I would love to go to India with you someday, and you show me the things that an interview that I heard you give. And I really highly recommend that people listen to the podcast about you talking about this letter. You talk about actually walking the steps of Gandhi, right? Mm-hmm. Controversial figure. We understand that, right? But I would like to do that with you. That I think that would, but I think that's really what all this is about. And the problem is that all of our efforts are, we want to take pieces of spirituality without that hard road, without that hard work, and we know that, it's like how hard it is to change ourselves, our failures, our untruth, Gandhi's whole thing about truth, right? All of our failures, and we just, like the rich young man, we go away sad, and most people do. I know in my own experience, it's like you want to throw in the towel, like there's a lot of that in experiences, right? And what I really appreciate, go back to Gandhi, and again, what leads to that sort of radical to be able to write a letter to Adolf Hitler, in the first year of World War II. But is all that interior work, all the different components of radical love, and you can't fake it. You can fake it for a month, what is that beautiful line of Bertolt Brecht, where he says, and I'll paraphrase it. He says, it's great. And it's great to work for a day. It's great to work for a month. But there are those that do it for a lifetime. And in Spanish, he says, and they're imprescindibles. That is, and yeah. So yeah, I'm inspired by that radical love, and I'm not afraid of. I know people. That's the kind of radical love I think that is the only thing that will transform the world. Yeah, and I wrote a letter this morning. I wrote something this morning about, since we get lost in this digital world. And I was talking to a friend that works for a very large NGO, and they called their collaborators members, their subscribers, and in our work, they're not subscribers; it's part of our community. They have names, and I think that relationships are really at the basis of everything. And Gandhi first approaches Hitler in that letter as a human being, radical. Adolf Hitler, that the manifestation of evil, in our, in our time, and but that's the kind of radical love I think that's it. So we all have to figure out, how to live a lifestyle, and we're bound to make lots of mistakes, right? I'm 61 years old, and this is cable television, so I can say fuck. I fucked up a lot, right? And but inside of all that too, experiments, right? Mistakes, okay, keep going, and then you like the scientific model, then you go back into the laboratory, all right, and you tweak and change and add, and okay, this failed. I failed in that area. So what do I need? How do I change that? And there's no shortcut to it. And everyone wants a shortcut. Gandhi's road, resisting, the journey was long, South Africa and in England, and then going back to, back and forth, 10 years here, and then going back to India, and then that long journey. Everything takes time. We don't have to be, and as I was reading a lot of the stuff from India, I thought so much of you, right? Because you're also a very inspirational figure to so many people. Okay. But to understand that personal responsibility of being able to take not to be in a rush, and also to realize and have the humility to realize that that the granito, or the little bit you're going to put in, is enough.
Yeah.
Right. It's enough. You don't have to do it all. You don't have to. The United States. I'm going to grab something. It's all about winning the trophy.
Mm-hmm.
Right. I was talking to someone recently who's very frustrated in life because he starts things and then he fails and he quits, and the idea is, if you're not a professional, if you're not totally, professional at something, it's not worth doing. Well, I think Gandhi would tell us it's all about the journey, right? Dorothy Day said, all the way to heaven is heaven. All the way to heaven is heaven. Oh, how beautiful is that?
That's great. And so what I'm trying to do with this kind of episode, this is a new thing, is to get more interaction on these solo casts that I put out. So I really appreciate that. And where I'm trying to go with it is, I think I mentioned at the end of that Gandhi one, is really tools for real life community building. And that's something where you obviously have decades of experience. And I'd love to put together another episode with you and share a little bit of your wisdom on what worked and what didn't in terms of building community.
Thank you for calling it wisdom, but it's definitely It's all been an experiment. And I think the beautiful thing about our 31-year experiment is that, also that spiritual element is very real. And I so enjoyed reading some of the Hindu writers, and it felt so familiar. It just felt so familiar, and the idea is that, there is grace, right? That when we think that it's all about us, I think we fail. But if it's all about love, and if God is love, if it's all about love, we'll get there. But if we're willing to do the work, right? If we're willing to do the work, and so I don't know. After 31 years at this, I'm excited about our new year. Like I really am, and but my new year had to begin with in silence, right? Prayer, meditation, listening, quiet, and allow that also to manifest itself, not only and then it's like we talked about that stone soup, it's bringing in all those elements, right? It's bringing in all those elements, and I think that's what I really appreciated in our reading. I think this is the fourth time I've picked up Gandhi's book, and there's just a lot there. But I love the idea of experiment, right? This failed. Yeah, this is how I thought then. This is what I've learned. Relationship with his wife, very interesting, very harsh.
Yeah.
And evolves, and I hopefully, I think that's what makes communities. Everyone thinks a lot of other things, but I think communities have to evolve the way they think, the way they operate. They don't get stuck in boxes. We've been very fortunate that we're able to shift and change, and then our leadership just grew. Our leadership grew up in that environment. So how nice to be led by all new indigenous because they're from here leadership.
Yeah.
31 years.
It's beautiful, John.
Hi everyone, this is Martin San, your producer, audio editor, and sound designer in chief for the 10,000 Heroes team. I just wanted to take a minute to thank you for listening to our show. Let me tell you a couple of things. 10,000 Heroes is brought to you by the team at Momentum Lab. Pierre does our artwork, DJ Plainview composed our theme music, and I handle all the editing, production, and sound design. Please, if you like the show, follow it, rate it, tell your friends about it, and write to us. That really helps us make the impact we want to make. And now we are closing this episode with a word from our main sponsor, who also happens to be our host, Anchor.
Hey, everybody. Thanks again for listening. If you like this episode, there's two things I want you to do. One, introduce me to the most inspiring person you know so I can have them on the show. And two, take the next step towards us hanging out in person. Maybe that's signing up for the newsletter. Maybe that's attending an upcoming in-person or virtual event. What I'm trying to do here is destroy the basic one-to-many nature of this medium, podcast, entertainment, and replace it with something that actually builds connections between people, the beloved community, getting closer together, understanding each other, one conversation at a time. So, join me. Bye.